Hello, I'm Maggie Ayres and I'm a mixed media artist based in southwest Scotland. I'm going to be talking about three of my paintings, Happed in Sky, 1, 2 and 3. I'm not an artist who works very quickly. It takes me quite a long time to mull over ideas and kind of embrace myself in a concept that feels like it could drive a whole body of work. Currently I'm working on a body of work called Breath. Before I even get to the point where I'm starting to put my work together, where I'm painting or making, then I've spent quite a long time in thought, writing, reading, allowing memories to come up for me, and making marks in my sketchbook. That's the simplest way of putting what I do in the sketchbook. It's trying out ideas, and all the time I'm working on them, it's also feeding in to the overall umbrella concept, I suppose. The titles for me are always really important and come first before I start working on the boards. The title for these paintings, Happed in Sky, came from the Scots word happed, which means being wrapped up, and swathed, which in itself can have a sort of joint meaning of being kept warm against the bad weather and protected, but also somehow sort of constrained by, that's the bit that we're being wrapped up in, contained. And in the sense of happed in sky, which actually was triggered by a song by the Scots singer Michael Mara, which was Happed in Mist. And it's the notion of the sky containing us, covering us, wrapping us up, and enclosing us as if we were part of it. I wanted to emphasise the unity of the sky over landmass and over oceans, the ability to providing a continuity and an interdependence. At the time when I started, I didn't know there was going to be more than one painting. In a sense, all the work that comes into that could be under one body of work are interconnected by that overriding theme. But sometimes there's a group of paintings which piece together like variations on a theme, I suppose. The connection between them is stronger. They're more an expansion from one to the other. So in this series of paintings, I got to the end of the first one and then realised that there was more to come without breaking that thread. At that point, I hadn't even got the painting boards lined up of equal size. In fact, all the pieces are of different sizes. They're all square format, but they're not the same size. And that played in my favour because it allowed certain things to be expanded and then minimised, I suppose. In early 2019, I was starting to get some ideas of where I wanted to go with new work, and I was making pieces that were more disparate, but I felt there was starting to be a sense to what was happening. And by the summer of 2019, I had already decided that I would be going on a week-long residency down to Carlaverick on the Solway coast, which is just along the road from where I was born and where I spent my first years of my childhood. The work was going to be about the notion of sky and how it contributes to our sense of place in the landscape, of any given landscape, but at the same time the particular landscape that is the Merseland of the Solway. The sky is big. It was the first sky down there that I looked up to and saw when I was a baby. So in that regard, there feels like there's some importance there for me. So having got to grips a bit with the concept of the pieces of work I wanted to make, always knowing that as I work, new thoughts come into the process and expand and develop it and make it go off in tangents that I couldn't have foreseen at the beginning. And that's an exciting part for me, that whole, the flow of that path as you work through. Some of the work can challenge in unexpected ways, but that only allows you to go deeper into the meaning behind the work. As an abstract artist, it's key for me that I'm able to express all of this stuff that's going on in my head, all these ideas and thought processes, that I can express them into a different medium, into a visual medium, which is the paint I work with and the way I use it on the boards. I'm striving all the time to get that feeling out onto the board. I said before, the sketchbook is key to the process because it helps shape the way I'm going. It's the kind of the stitched together ideas that form, and some could get thrown out and used at a future date perhaps, or completely lost by the wayside. But the sketchbook helps me shape the way any body of work and any painting is going. Although I'm not always entirely sure what that's going to be as I'm working in the sketchbook. It's a circular process, I suppose. So I think about, for example, flow and mark making. There are certain rhythms and that are a constant in my work. Mark making feeds into this flow, and I suppose if I was describing myself, mark maker is as good a description as any in some ways. Also key is the rhythm of the marks and how they move between, how they move in the spaces between them. That gap between them, the space between, is as important as the marks I make. It's useful in the sketchbook. Usually I work just with in monochrome because it's more about the bones of the work, I suppose. Trying to build that framework to make the paintings. Line and texture are also key, both in the sense of line as in mark making, but as I've said, the gaps between. But the texture of the line, the texture of the the paint as it's layered onto a board, and then rubbed back and scraped into again, and more colour put on top and scraped through. All this building up of line. So the lines are on the 2D surface, but I'm also building up almost like a topography of mark making and texture. It is absolutely key that I'm working on an exploration of texture and flow, and so that the way the surfaces absorb the paint and the ink can help direct a thought. It's that circular process again. Eventually I get to the point where I start thinking about a colour palette to use for my paintings. For these 3 paintings, it's the same palette, maybe used in different ways on each piece. I suppose what's harder for me to explore in the sketchbook, and which becomes a much more paint-based medium, is when I'm scratching into the surfaces. I use scalpels and all sorts of various tools that have got good points and edges that can scour out and scrape out the paint and make fine lines, which I can then rub more paint into to get the fineness. They're always with me. There's another brilliant Scottish word, screeve, which is about grazing. You've screeved your knee, you've grazed your knee. And it's one I use a lot in terms of using the scalpel and pieces of wire wool to rub into the paint, to screeve the paint, so you get that grazed appearance, so you can see through the surface to what's going on underneath, the layers that I've been building up. Again, it's that the narrative of the piece as you delve down. Finally, as I work on and on through the sketchbook, and some more relevant to some pieces than others, then I'll start really seriously considering the colour palette. Last summer, enforced by in 2020, with the situation with COVID and the lockdowns, I am not able to get into my regular studio. I've made this studio at home, which is much smaller than my usual one. But I started working, because I was finding it difficult to work in my usual oil paints and cold wax medium. It feels like it's a bigger, more expansive, expressive, gestural way of working, which I think is mainly in my head actually, because as time's moved on I've managed to get back to that place. But at that point I decided to work more with watercolour, which was fairly new to me. And at first I thought I was making something completely different. I didn't really make the connection between the work I was doing with watercolour and the work I normally was making with the oil paint. And it's only as time has passed that I've been able to make that connection with what I was doing. And this is where texture comes in. I was finding different ways of making texture in the watercolour, of merging the colour, of smoothing it out, of rubbing it through, of blurring the edges, making sharp lines, and then putting more colour over the top. And that's when I realised actually it's just one big continuum of work that feeds into the next one. I'm aware this sounds a bit muddled, but it actually is the way my process is. It's about experimenting so much. Happed in Sky 1, 2 and 3 incorporate all these ideas with that specific palette, wanting to feel a communion with my landscape, that it had shaped me. These are ideas that I'm continuing to explore through my reading and some writing, and of course through my creative practice. I think the three pieces can hang together, and they have a connection between them. They also stand alone. They echo each other in lots of ways. So I suppose they also stand for my process, my creative practice, the work I make, because each one is informed by the one that's gone before. And usually as I work on more than one at a time, then that's a continuum anyway. As you move back and forward, there is no separation. And that's another important concept to the work I'm making at the moment. I'm trying to focus in on that notion of no separation between pieces of my work, between us and our landscape. You can see more of these paintings if you go to my website, maggieayres.co.uk. I hope this has helped to explain something of what I do. Thank you.